Awesome. Okay, before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge the land in which we are operating with our land acknowledgement. So, as a community, we have the responsibility to honor, care for, and respect all that creation gives to provide us with life. This includes the land, water, air, fire, animals, plants, and our ancestors. The Anishinaabe people have utilized this land for millennia, and we would like to acknowledge their direct descendants, the Mississaugas of the credit of the First Nation, as well as the rightful caretaker and title holders of this land upon which we live, work, and conduct ourselves. We acknowledge our treaty relationship, Treaty 22, and the responsibilities to both the land and these original peoples. We also recognize that this land is rich in pre-contact history and customs, which includes the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, and since European contact has and continues to become home for Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. It is in the spirit and intent of the dish with one spoon, wampum agreement, whereby we will collectively care for and respect the land, water, animals, and each other in the interest of peace and friendship and for the benefit of not only ourselves, but our future descendants. And also happy Earth Week to everyone as well as you think about the land in which we are living and those that came before us and those that will come after us. It's very exciting to recognize the world around us. And of course, welcome if you're just joining us to our spring webinar series. This webinar will be going over all of your questions about calculations and the final submission. Mike and Denise sent the regards. They were going to be joining us, but they just couldn't take the time this week, but they are available for questions. So if you have a specific question that we cannot answer for you tonight, then put it into the chat. I'm going to be emailing Mike and Denise everything that we talk about today and then emailing you personally with those answers. If you already reached out with a question that was related to calculations that didn't fit into our calculation sheet, just know that I've already sent those questions to Mike and Denise and I'm waiting for their response. So I will be in touch definitely this week as soon as possible. As soon as I get those answers, I'll be sending them on to you. So of course, welcome to the call. On the call with us is myself, Katie, and Georgia, who will be moderating the chat for me, just taking note of any questions or comments. We will have time at the very end of the presentation to go through all those questions. If you're joining us from FeedLoop, welcome. I think you'll definitely be able to join in and see the chat as well. But if you're having any issues or if you're having issues joining, there was a link that went out, I believe, in an email. So you'll be able to join that link and join us in the Zoom. And yeah, you can check out this webinar afterwards as it's recorded. So if you want to follow up on anything we go over, then you can do that there. Awesome. Okay, so this is the webinar lists. This is also up on our website. These are the past webinars that we've had. If you haven't seen one of these ones, and there's something that of interest to you as you think about writing up your final submission, your final project, all of these recordings are available on our website as well as on FeedLoop, so you can go back and look. It is mandatory, and we strongly encourage you to watch at least 2. You'll see that as part of the final submission. Just check off the ones that you've seen. If you watched it on YouTube, if you watched it on FeedLoop, we can check and we can see who's watched it and where. So we'll be checking that for you. You don't have to worry about that. Just check off the ones that you did see. So you can see we had our spring break activities last week, and today, April 20th, is our final submission. Your final project is due on the 25th. That's by midnight on the 25th. In order to receive your 20 community involvement hours, you need to submit your final project. So that's what we're here to do. I'll talk you through the steps. Make sure it's very simple and easy for you, because I want to make sure that you get recognized for the work that you've been working on these past 6 weeks. So if you do have any questions, do feel free to reach out. I've already gotten lots of great emails, so keep those coming. And then next week, we'll talk a little bit more about how to communicate your impact. And we have our wrap-up event on May 14th, which will just be a chance for us to celebrate all the work we've done, talk about some projects that are being recognized, as well as our final GHG reduction numbers through all the projects submitted. So that'll be exciting. More information coming soon. Awesome. So this is every single step of the project so far. We identified our topic, we brainstormed it. These are some of the topics of those spring webinars as that schedule that we just saw. Again, if any of these topics interest you, maybe something you're thinking about as you write up your final report, do go back and check out those past webinars. Our next sort of looking forward is, of course, our submission and that celebration, those wrap-up events coming up. Remember, of course, that once you submit your project, you're entitled to all of these things, those 20 volunteer hours, our certificate of completion that we will send to you, as well as awards. All of the projects submitted are eligible to receive an award. We got a great judging panel of HDSB staff, some HEN members, as well as our corporate sponsor, Dylan Consulting. So they're all involved in that, and they're excited to check out what you guys have been working on. Cool, so here again, just checking off all the steps that we've done. If you're looking for any of these more information here, these are the topics, of course, of all of our spring webinars. I talk about them all the time because they're very important. And they're also, these are some of the areas that are in the toolkit just to keep track of. And as you can see, last two things, final submission, wrap-up event, that's what we're gonna talk about right tonight. So let's go. Cool, I'm gonna start by talking about the calculation sheet, and I'm gonna pull up the calculation sheet that would have been emailed to you. If you do not have a calculation sheet, then definitely email myself. Maybe Georgia, if you can throw my email into the chat so that people can copy paste or screenshot it. So I can give you that sheet. The calculation sheet is a tool for you to use. We wanna make sure things are very simple. So the number one thing to remember as you move in maybe to the end of your project, or if you're just kind of thinking back, you want to remember that we told you to do a baseline calculation. So in order to understand the impact, so your project has the impact in reducing GHG, you need to know what it is you would normally do. So that's kind of standard when you're doing like a scientific experiment. You want to kind of see what would it normally be like if I didn't do this action? What would my life normally be like? How much GHG would I normally use or send out? So that's your baseline calculation. And then, of course, your program calculation is what you've actually chosen to do. Did you decide to bike instead of drive? Did you decide to eat only tofu instead of meat? Something like that. Or did you cut out an appliance or something like that? So these are all the things that you've done. The difference between this baseline and the program is your impact. That's the number that goes into your final sheet there. Cool. So these are a couple frequently asked questions. So number one, in relation to the final report and the calculations, there is no extension. So you need to have finished your final report, finished this calculation sheet, found that impact, submitted everything by April 25th by midnight on the 25th, that's Sunday. You won't be penalized if your project's not done. There's a whole section in the final report which we'll cover in a second that says, is your project ongoing? You will not be penalized too if your project was interrupted because of COVID regulations, things the way things shifted that might have impacted your project. So those things won't be impacted in terms of your judging or if your eligibility for prizes. Just so you can talk a little bit about that there's a little section which we'll go over about discussing your project. Just talk about what went on, if your project's going on, if it's finished, all that type of stuff. You can put that into your final report. So don't think that if your project's not finished by the 24th or the 25th or something like that, that you can't submit. We encourage you to submit anyway. Again, I already kind of covered this, but what happens if my project was interrupted, schools closed, things shifted? Can you still submit your project? Yes, you can. I encourage you to submit your project, get that 20 community involvement hours, be recognized for the work that you've already put in, because you guys put in a lot of work, and make sure that you are recognized for that. So as long as you have a baseline and a program, so baseline as long as you've calculated something about your normal GHG use, greenhouse gas use, even if it's 1 or 2 days, we encourage again for it to be at 7 days, but if you don't have that time, then you can of course just focus on the 1 to 2 days, whatever you have. And then the program, again, ideally it would be great to have a little bit longer, but if you have a short amount of time based on how your project was, or if there's something that was interrupting, or if you got busy, and whatever you can put into the final submission and into that calculation form is totally okay by us. Another big question is, am I doing the calculations right? Well, if you're using the sheet and following those instructions, you're probably doing a good job, but if you're ever concerned, then do feel free to email your whole calculation document or anything you have, even if you're not using our sheet that we've shared with you, to me or to a friend. We can also set up a Zoom meeting one-on-one. We can just kind of chat it through, and I can help you double check your calculations. I've already had some great emails of people just sending me their forms. What I'll do is I'll give them a quick look. I'll put little comments on the side if there's anything you need to shift or change. And again, if you are measuring something that is not in the calculation sheet, do reach out so that I can help you find the most accurate numbers for that project that you're doing. Cool, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna shift to the calculation sheet so we can just walk through that sheet one more time. So give me a second as I switch my screen. Cool, so this is the calculation sheet. It would have been emailed to you. Again, if you do not have this sheet, please reach out to me. My email's now in the chat. This sheet, again, takes those calculations that were in our toolkits that were outlined by Mike and Denise. So you'll notice them at the top here. These are all the calculations. So if you're not using this calculation sheet, do not worry. You don't have to use this sheet. This is just a tool for you to use. As long as you are calculating using these calculations, these top calculations here, then you're probably on the right track. Again, if you're doing a mix of different projects, then you can just use the individual tab sheets. The final total sheet will pull all those individual numbers and you'll find those totals. This number right here, sheet number F5, I'll reference it later in the presentation, but this is the number that I really want you to put into that final report. This is the number, this is where your impact is. If you put in, well, let's just go through it right now. Cool, so transportation. So like I said, with the baseline GHG admission, this is before you've enacted your action for your project. You put in how many days did you do whatever you did, or in this case, it'd be driving. How far did you drive? Here you have to put a 1. So if this is for bus, even if you're not taking a bus, it's just part of the calculation, you just gotta put that in. Energy intensity, take a look at what type of vehicle you drive. If the vehicle you drive is not here, do email me. This number matters. It's liters per 100 kilometers. So I can help you find this number for the vehicle in which you are driving or your parents are driving. And then your energy coefficient here. So you just want to look at table over 2. You want to put the right number in there for yourself. So it could be a gasoline, a light diesel, or heavy diesel. So you just put those things in right there. Just pull those direct numbers and you put it in there. Cool, so that's for your baseline. So you're measuring your baseline beforehand for your transportation project. Now you're gonna do your action. So you can put in how many days you did it. So let's say I only did it for 7 days. It doesn't matter. These numbers don't have to be the same. You just have to be accurate. So whatever you decided, if you counted your program for 12 and your program for 7, put it in the true amount there. Ideally, it'd be great if they were the same, but it won't affect the final calculation. Cool, so now instead of driving, I was walking, so I put in the distance there. I have to put the 1 here. So if you're finding that your calculations aren't being filled out, you can see that things are starting to fill out in the bottom for me. Potentially, there could be something going wrong with the way that these calculations, these Excel sheets here, are pulling. You can see that that's the mass calculation there. So if you're having any issues there or something's kind of gone wrong in your sheet, do feel free to reach out and we can go through that together. Amazing. As you can see, the numbers pull right to the end total, so you can see that those transportation numbers, the ones that are down here, are exactly the same on this last sheet. If you're seeing this, this is just a code and a notification sorry, in Excel that this calculation cannot be divided by 0, or can't have anything in these columns here. I sent out an email about it. If you can just put zeros in all of these ones, kind of like this, then you'll see those numbers pop all the way across. If you are doing a mix of topics, Then whatever you put in your other ones. So let's say I was also doing something with waste. I was doing it for 12, and then I did my program for 7 days. Here, let's say what I was doing was I was trying to divert something from, instead of going to landfill, it went to recycling. So it has to be measured in grams. So you could use, I guess, even if you have a weight that you use to measure body weight, you could use that. If you could, so whatever you want to use in order to measure this weight, it has to be in grams. If it's in something else, just convert it. You can go onto Google and find those conversions. If you're having problems, again, email us and we can help you out. So let's say I put 12 here, and then said I diverted it to the recycling instead. So you can see those numbers will automatically fill. Again, they'll fill over here. If I'm not doing these columns, these all end up as 0. Yeah, just put them as 0 if they don't don't relate to you. You don't need to worry about these columns if they're not something that you're measuring. And you'll see that this calculation here is just the sum of all the impact. So this number here is the impact number. This is the sum of the whole entire impact that you've done. So if I was doing something transportation and waste related, this is the number that I put into that final report. And then of course, upload this entire Excel document in and we can see exactly all this stuff that you've been doing as well. Is there any questions right now in the chat about this calculation sheet? Just gonna take a look. Yeah, so if you're using your own calculation sheet, you're not using the one that we shared with you, that's totally okay too. You can also check out a sample calculation Efreen put together in the toolkit that really sort of does all the math for you. You can see as it all sort of calculated there. If you calculated these numbers, not in Excel, maybe just on a sheet of paper, that's totally okay too. Put in your final total impact number there. So this number here, whatever you calculated, whether it was in this sheet or if it was in your own sort of way, or if you had your own sheet, or if you did it on the paper, this is the number that we want to keep, or we want to have. This will be what we feed in to see what our final impact all together, all the projects that we are finally submitted, what it is that we've omitted together. And by omitted, I mean omitted instead. Cool, so if you're using something else, that's totally cool. Yes, I asked that you submit the calculation sheet. If you don't have a calculation sheet or you don't have anything, just the final numbers, so you didn't use this. If you use this sheet, then please upload the calculation sheet as you used it. If you didn't use it and you have something else, upload that. If you have neither of those things, then just move past that question. But most important, I want to know how much GHG you actually reduced, because that's our big question that we are asking. Yep, I can do a step-by-step right now for the home electricity. I'll go through that one right now. And then I'm going to move on to the final report, and I'll come back to questions about the calculation sheet here. So yeah, so home energy is a great one. I think it was a very popular topic, especially because we're all in our homes. Here you'll see that there's a drop-down menu of all of the items that are sort of picked out into this table 1. If your item isn't part of this drop-down menu, don't worry about it. You can also, I'm trying to think of something that's not in the drop-down menu. I think hot shower is not. You can also type in whatever appliance that you're using if it's not one of the ones that's in this drop-down menu. Again, just highlight in your baseline calculations the appliance that you're using. Say it's a hot tub or something like that too. Again, how many days were you doing this baseline calculation? Reminder, baseline is before you've even done any actions. This is just how you normally would live or use this appliance in your regular day life. You would put in how long you would be using that in seconds. So it has to be in seconds. Do pay attention to the units. Those do matter in terms of the calculation. So if you're doing it off of this sheet, you're doing your own calculations, just take note of this, of the units here. It's in seconds because the watts is joules per second, so you just want to keep those consistent. So let's say I use my coffee maker 12 days. Say I was using it for 5,000 seconds. Let's say I used a hot shower for, I don't know, something like that, and I don't really use my hot tub. something like that. Anyway, so you put it into seconds, however you want they are. Then you take a look at table 1. So you can see that this is in joules per second or watts. So again, whatever appliance you picked, if it was coffee maker, I could look for coffee maker here. I see that it's 894, so I put that in there. Hot shower, this is a number that I estimated because there was a lot of shower, so I added this in. So if you did have a calculation sheet where hot shower wasn't in, do reach out. And you can take this number down, or you can add it in yourself, or I can just send you the sheet that I have here. This is estimated for a hot shower that uses a water heater that's electric for an estimate of 10 minutes. That's an average shower based in Canada. So yeah, you can just pull this number here, and then my hot tub, I used 5,000. So I put that in there like that. This emission factor is a constant, so if you're using something that uses electricity, it'll be 20, so you pop it in there. And all those numbers will feed in here. And then same thing, you just pull the same appliances, say you're using them, and I used it for 7 days, but I just didn't use them. Let's say I used the coffee maker less, so I only used it for 100 seconds. For my shower, let's say I didn't have hot showers at all, so that was 0 seconds. And then for my hot tub again, I put it for 0. So if you just completely aren't using it, it's 0. If you just reduce, then you put in the amount that you reduced. So that for appliances, you don't necessarily have to stop using them completely in order to enact your action. You could just be a reduction instead. Cool, and then you can put the same numbers over here. And then you can see that that number just popped in right down there at the bottom. This number impact, you can see, is this number, the baseline emission, minus the program emission, and you get your final impact, which again, would feed over here. It didn't because I put zeros here, but it would usually feed right here, and then you would find that this number would change based on whatever was in this column here. Cool. If you have any questions specific to your project and you're working through this sheet, again, I encourage you to email your sheet to me. I'll just put little comments to let you know how things are going. If you the appliance you picked you don't find in this table, do reach out. Again, I am connecting with Mike and Denise. They have a whole list and some sources that we can find the correct watts. You want it to be watts, this unit. There are some other units you might see in the toolkit to measure energy intensity. You can use other units, but that would affect the units up here. So if you do choose to use, or you do find a number for something else, I can't think of anything right now, but if you are using different units, just have to make sure they're all consistent. That's totally cool too. If that's something that's a case is for you yourself, or that you're like that resonates with you and you like to do something a little bit different, just email just to make sure you're on the right track. Cool, like I said, I'll come back to the calculation sheet and more questions at the end, but I'm going to move on to talk a little bit more about the final report. Again, give me 1 second as I shift from my Excel into my PowerPoint. Amazing. Cool, so let's look at the final submission form. So I just took a screenshot of the final submission. I think Georgia will throw the link in for the final report. Some of you may have had taken a look at it. You can go in, you can take a look, fill it in and come back into the sheet as often as you'd like. So you can take a look at what is required, but we're just gonna go through them step by step here. Again, I'll answer questions at the end, but this is just a run through of what I expect in each of these different sections. So as you open up the final report Google Form, you'll see that there's a section 1, which is about just the basics of the project. You can put a title of your project. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could be something as simple as you want, just Generation Green project, or you can come up with a title if that's something that you'd like to do for my transportation waste project. I could be Katie reduces her GHG. That was a bad title, but that's just what I came up with on the spot. But it can be whatever you want here. You feel free to get creative with it. For how many Generation Green students contributed to this project, all you have to do is put a number in that one. So you can only put a max of 8. We're keeping our group sizes really small. Most of our groups are 5 or 4. So just put a direct number. If you're doing a project by yourself, just put 1. So you're just one person. Then you just list the emails here. You can see as my example, I just listed Georgia's and I's emails. They do have to be in email form, but all you have to do is just list those emails with a comma, so you can put all the names in there. Cool, that's pretty straightforward. Same thing, just list the schools. If you're all in the same school that you're doing a project together, just put the one school name. If you are doing an individual project, of course, just put your school down there. If you're from different schools, just put the school name, comma, and then the other school name. For the grade, if you're doing an individual project, just check off the grade that you're in. If you're doing a project with students from multiple different grades, just check off all the grades that apply. I should say, and I'll flip to the actual final report, if you're thinking, like I was for a second, oh, there's not a place for me to put my name, there is. I just didn't take a screenshot of it. If you're working as a group, just do comma, just put both names there together. You can be first and last name there. You'll see that as you go into the final report. Cool, so basics, again, just the basic information about who you are, your project title, what grade, and school. Then we go into section 2. This is sort of where you'll be doing a little bit more writing. Feel free to grab these questions, copy and paste them maybe into a Google Doc, type up the responses and copy paste them back in, or write directly into the sheet, however suits you. So the first one is just very short. It's basically what you put into your project proposal. It could be something like, my project looked at transportation. I started on April 1st and I finished on April 18th. I looked at how far I drive between my home in Oakville to my school. So you're just looking at just from school to home. You're not looking at other things. So that's kind of what you talked about there, just the who, what, where, why, how of your project. Again, if you have your project proposal answers, you could probably just copy and paste those over. You could tweak them a little bit just to add in a specific time that you actually did your project there. Your methodology is just, again, it's very similar to the one above, but you're looking at a little bit more specific into what it is that you actually did. So whereas this is a little bit more general, just very basic. I did my project is transportation, I did it between here. Your methodology would be something like, I tracked my distance using Google Sheets. I found the distance using Google Maps. I drive a Honda. In the project, my action was I biked. I only counted my commute from the school to my home, and I didn't count my commute when I was traveling to other places like ballet or the grocery store. I measured my distance in kilometers or whatever you need to do for the calculation sheet. I used the calculation sheet or the toolkit to measure my GHG. So you're just talking through a little bit about what you did. Did you make any assumptions? Did you leave anything out? And then a little bit maybe why you left it out. Like, I only wanted to look at how far I drove or my GHG admission if I biked to school, and only school, not anything else. I didn't worry about anything else. So just talk a little bit more about why you made the decisions you did and what happened in the project. Okay, the next part would be your calculations. We talked a little bit before. You can upload your calculation sheet here. Again, yeah, if you don't have anything to upload, you do not have to upload anything. I think I made this question mandatory, so you have to fill it out, but I can switch that. But if you do have a calculation template or that Excel sheet they're filling out, I do encourage you to put it in here because, again, it's just a nice way for us to see the stuff that you've done. Just upload that sheet directly into, or whatever you're working on, into the Google form. This number right here is just the calculation sheet. You look at that F5 number, that number that I highlighted in yellow when I was showing the calculation sheet before. Remember, if you're getting that sort of error number in Excel, just put zeros in the columns that do not apply for you, then it makes the calculation work. It's just an error because Excel cannot recognize the numbers in that calculation. That's why you get it. But you do not need to worry. Just focus on the stuff that you are measuring. So just put that direct final number. You can copy and paste it and put it right there. And then you can move on to the next part, which is about the results. Here, again, I'm not asking for lots of information. Just talk about what you achieved, what happened, what was the outcome, what did you actually do. So my final impact was 626. You can talk a little bit about that you reduced 626 GHG emissions. I did that by doing my action. So very simple there. Discuss your project. You can just talk about if you had any challenges. Here is where if your project was interrupted by anything COVID related, COVID regulations, then you can talk about that here. If that's a challenge and maybe how you overcame it, or maybe you couldn't, and then you talk a little bit about that there, and then what you learned or took away from the project. You can put all that stuff in there. Finally, this is the final section of your report. You talk a little bit about your reflection on the social justice lens. So you just talk about how this relates to the current climate justice issue. This is a little bit more reflective, so don't feel like you have to do any research. It can just be from your own mind, or from just something you've learned in school. So you can just put that in there. But if you do want to do some extra research, this is a great chance for you to do it as well, just for your own learning. And then right after, is your project ongoing? You can put that in there. If yes, then just say what's going on, how is it ongoing. If it's no, just put no, and you don't need to answer anything else. Finally, if you have anything like photos or posters or a screenshot of a social media post that you were doing or something like that, a PowerPoint presentation that you thought would be helpful to showcase your report, you can pop that into the optional. If you do not have to do it, only if you want to. Cool, the last little final section is just feedback. It's just for a chance to let us know what worked well for you, what didn't, what we can do better for next year. This is where you'll check off which webinars you watched and whatever applies. Do not worry, we can check your attendance. So just make sure that you're watching them. There's lots of availability. If you're on Feedloop, just watch them on Feedloop. We can see that. If you go onto our website, you can watch them on the YouTube there. Just click from the website. You can see that you've clicked that video. And of course, part of this section as well will let us know if you want to attend the wrap-up event on May 14th, so that I can send you further details on how to join. Cool. So again, this is sort of a final report, frequently asked questions, just things I wanted to reiterate through I just spoke about. Again, for the total sheet and the calculation template, the number that we're most interested in is that final impact number. So that's, if you're looking at the calculation sheet, that's F5. That's at cell F5 on the totals tab. If you're doing it yourself, you're calculating your impact. That's your baseline minus your project or your program GHG. That is the number that we want to see into the final report. Again, this is all the sections of the final report. These are the things that should be included. The who, what, where, just a little brief description, what you did, what happened, what were the results, maybe reflect a little bit on the results, what you learned, and then, of course, a little bit more about the social justice aspect, and then any diagrams, images, pictures, whatever you want to include, that's up to you. Cool, so I think it would have gone into the chat. Georgia, if you can also put it in the chat now, this is the final report link. Again, if you want to receive your 20 community involvement hours, then you do need to submit your final project by April 25th. That's midnight on the 25th Sunday. If you're late, if you have late submission, they won't be considered for prizes awards, and we won't be able to give you those 20 community involvement hours. So do submit your projects on time. Don't leave it to the last minute. You got plenty of time. I know things are busy for you, and I hope that going through everything step by step will help to you a little bit, so you can see that it's very specifically what I want you to type up. I'm going to put together a little frequently asked questions, break down all of that stuff that I give you in a one sheet, so you can just reference it. So I can make it very simple and easy for you. I'd love to give you the 20 community involvement hours. So what you need to do is just submit your report at whatever stage or whatever way that it is for yourself. So even if it's not fully finished, if it's ongoing, if you got interrupted, do submit your project so that you can receive those 20 hours for the work that you did. Of course, again, the wrap-up event, there'll be more information about this coming. I just wanted to let you know that it is on its way. It'll be on the May 14th. It'll be a chance for you to hear about other projects that are going on right now, a chance for you to win prizes, just a chance for us all to gather and recognize the stuff that we've done together within this 6 weeks. And we can put that final number, so I can take every single GHG impact number that was submitted in a final report, put them all together, and we can see what we collectively reduced together. So that'll be very exciting. More information coming soon. Again, if you do not want to be entered to win prizes or awards, you're just interested in maybe just getting the 20 hours, you don't really want anything else after that, that's totally cool. That's up to you. You'll see that in that final section, that feedback section. There's just a question that asks you if you're interested in attending or not. You can just check off based on whatever you'd like. So just do, all projects will get the 20 community involvement hours. I'm working with the HDSB. So I've given them what our requirements are. It'll be very simple. We don't need to, I'll send out an email probably just to confirm the whole entire process, but the way that it's explained to me is that the HDSB, they'll be able to just offer those 20 hours directly to you. We don't need to do a letter in the same traditional sense as I think other community involvement hours are. But stay tuned for more information about how to get those hours post the 26th. Once I confirm the process with the Suzanne and I think it's Megan who I'm talking with there. Cool. If you aren't able to attend the wrap-up event but you want to, don't worry, it's going to be recorded. If you are going to be presenting your project there, if you're going to be recognized and you can attend, we'll definitely give you a shout out there. This is a chance, so if you are preparing like a PowerPoint or video and you think you want to be part of that wrap-up event and show it there, but you don't have enough time to finish it before the 26th, 25th, don't worry about it. You can also submit your project. You don't have to submit any PowerPoint during the project, but you can have 2 or 3 weeks to actually work on putting that together. And we can talk about it in our next webinar, how to communicate your project. So you'll have more time to put together a video or a poster, or PowerPoint, or whatever. So I encourage you to focus on finishing up the final submission. And then if there is anything that you're going to make to help making presenting your project more creative or more engaging, then you can work on that post. I'll be emailing you information about that closer to the date. Awesome. Again, this is just a shout out to FeedLoop. Some of you are coming through FeedLoop, of course. This is where I'll put all of the recordings for all the webinars. Again, I try to make them as accessible as possible to you, so they're also up on the website. Also upcoming on FeedLoop is all of our spring break activities. They were all recorded. They're all amazing, so I'm putting them up there so that if you didn't get a chance to see them, you can check them out, and you can also rewatch the ones that maybe you did get to see, but you just want to try out again. Cool. If you're looking for any more resources, you can find them up on our website. You can check out the toolkit, which I think Georgia can throw into the chat as well. You can check out our webinars on FeedLoop, again, on the website, just like I mentioned. And of course, you can email me. I mentioned a couple times, I'm going to be available all week for you. So if you want to set up a quick 15-minute just check-in on Zoom, I have time as well. If you just want to send me your calculation sheet just so to make sure you're on the right track and that everything looks great, do feel free to do that, and I'll just respond back with my comments or suggestions as well. Cool. This is when I'm going to pass over just briefly to Georgia before we move into answering all the questions you put into the chat. But of course, like I mentioned, this is Earth Week. We have a lot of things happening. Something I'll mention is our HEN bingo sheet. You can also find that up on the HEN website, different than the Climate Collective website. Georgia, sorry I didn't give you this one before, but you can just pop that one in the chat too. And so the HEN bingo sheet, the first 100 completed bingo sheets get native seeds, which will be mailed to you. So if that is something you're interested in and you'd like to just kind of take some time to fill it out, then do grab it. And I'm just going to pass it off to Georgia, talk a little bit about the upcycling workshops that she'll be running this week.
Yeah, so like Katie said, this week is Earth Week, so I wanted to remind you guys about all the activities we have going on this week. So we have 2 upcycling workshops that are already on YouTube, so you can just watch them whenever you're interested. It's on our Halton Environmental Network YouTube channel. And tomorrow on Wednesday, I have the Battle of the Bags, plastic versus paper versus canvas session, where we're gonna talk a little bit about what impact different bags have on the environment, then talk about some DIY ideas if you want to make your own reusable bag. I know that you guys are probably really busy with the project, and I know a lot of you have summatives, but if you're interested, I'm just going to put the registration link in the chat and you can join us if you're interested. And then as well, we also have our Earth Day screening of Percy on Thursday, so you don't want to miss that as well. So I just put it in the chat. So if you're interested for the Wednesday session, you can register for that, and I'll send out a Zoom link tomorrow.
Amazing. Thank you, Georgia. Yeah, and if you're looking for any of this information, again, you can find it up on our website. So if you didn't get a chance to grab that link, then you'll find them there. Awesome. All right, so all I'm going to do is just look through the chat and answer questions. Georgia, if you saw a question too that was up that you just want to read out to me as well, I'm just going to kind of scroll back and sort of answer questions as I see them. If you don't have any other questions, feel free to pop off the chat, but I do encourage everybody to stick around. You never know, I might answer something that you didn't even think about as a question that might help you in the final submission. So yeah, let's just get to it.
Yeah, so one common question we have is about the calculation sheet and whether it has to be an Excel file or if it can be uploaded as a Google Sheet or a PDF.
Great question. Yeah, all are acceptable. It can be as an Excel file. I did send it as an Excel file to all of you because if I sent it as a Google Sheet, then we would all be working from the same one and it would get a little confusing. But if you have a version of it that you put into the Google Sheet, then do feel free to upload that version, download it as a PDF file, upload the PDF. As long as it's easy and feasible for you and that works within that's easy for you, then I'm happy with either form. So yeah, great question.
And then we just have some more project specific questions if you want to get into those.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, so there's one question that says, can you do a step-by-step on how to calculate the emission factors in the home electricity tab?
Yeah, I think I did see that question as we were going through, but I'm just going to walk through really quickly again as I pop into our home. Yeah, we can see it here, right? I'll just go through it really quickly so we can all see it again. For the home electricity, again, this is a very common, I think, project because it was something that we could easily do at home. Here, put in the appliances that you chose. If there is, say, more than 3, then you can just create a new row. I can't do that. But anyway, you can just make a new row and then just add in as many appliances as you are counting. It does not have to be just 3, it could be more. Just if you're adding in stuff up here, you're going to want to add in other things here, and that you have to just double check that the calculation is still working for you down here. So if you do have more than 3 appliances, yeah, you can. That's totally cool. Just make sure that with Excel, as I'm sure you know, everything's pulled down from the sheet or the cell above. So you just want to make sure that those things are consistent. If you are sort of jumping around or using the sheet or changing it to suit your needs, and things have sort of jumped around a little bit too far that you can figure out yourself, then that's when you might want to email me just so we can double check to make sure that you're getting the right calculations. So again, so you just pick your appliance heater. You pick how long you are doing that action for. This is, you start with your baseline and then you do your program. So if it's the same item that you're looking at, you can just copy and paste it over. Maybe it's the same amount of days or slightly different. You put the seconds. So let's say I used it for 12 seconds. Something is probably longer, but I was just gonna put that down. Okay, let's put something longer. Like, yeah, 1,200, and then I just decided I'm not going to use my heater at all, and then I put in the watts. Again, we look at table 1 for heater. You can see it's right there. If you're not seeing something here, then you might, that's an opportunity for you to do either a little bit of research yourself, or if you're really struggling to find it, just reach out to me and I can help you find those numbers. For light bulb, I'll point out that it really does depend on the type of light bulb that you have in your house. There's some that are more eco-friendly that use different wattages, you know, like a natural light bulb that has a lateral light versus one that's more yellow. That does sort of change the amount of energy that it gives out or uses. So you just want to look usually in the packaging of the light bulb. You can usually find out the actual wattage there. It will give that number for you. So if you kind of look at the packaging of it, you can find it. If you're struggling, that information is pretty readily accessible online. So you can find it if you're struggling, then do reach out and you put that numbers in there. So you can see that everything sort of pops down to the bottom. You'll see that baseline emissions there, and you'll see my program emissions. So after I completed my action of not using my heater for the 6 days that I said I wasn't going to use it, and you'll see my impact here, my impact for the 6 days. So I did my action for 6 days per single day, per week, per month, per year. And then again, it'll pop in. You'll see that those same numbers popped in right here, and the total will go across. It's like the number, because again, these numbers are not filled out. So you can even put 0, so you can just delete them away, and you'll see that that final number pops in for you. This is the number, like I said, F5. This is the number that goes into our calculation sheet. This is the number that we're most interested in as part of our final submission report. Cool.
All right, and we also have a lot of questions about the wrap-up event, and if they want to present their project at it, how can they sign up for it?
Amazing. Great question. So in the final report sheet, which I will show right now, I have it ready to show too. Okay, you'll see, like I mentioned, that there's that section 1 where you put in all the information there. Your section 2, which is where you'll put in like the meat of your final report, and then your section 3. So if you're interested in being part of the wrap-up event and be eligible for prizes and awards, and you want to be involved in that, just you have to answer this question here so let you know that you're interested. The judges will be looking at all the different projects. I'll be looking at all the different projects, and I will be reaching out to all the students. If you're interested in showing your project, email me. I'll put you on the list. The event is going to be about, I think, either an hour and 30 minutes or 2 hours. I'm still confirming the timings. We'll have lots of opportunities to share projects. In terms of the format of the event, I'm still working on some of those details, but if you know right now that you want to be part of this, then let me know so I can keep track of that. But I'll be reaching out to all of you with more details, with the chance to also be part of this wrap event, present your project. So I'll be sharing more information on how you can do that, what we're asking for, and a little bit more details after the 25th. But as you're going through the form, just say, yes, I wish to be eligible. Yes, I do want to be involved. Then you can put that in here.
Okay, and Rita just has her hand raised, so yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. So, for example, for doing like a cleanup, so for the baseline, like I asked Afreen about this, and she said that you just keep you wouldn't do anything with the baseline emissions, since of course you're just like weighing the mass of all of your items. So I was just wondering, um like for the baseline emissions, if I just put all zeros and I only filled out one section, like for example the mass of waste sent to landfill in the program emissions, like the numbers go all into the negatives. And then if I copy that same amount and put it even in the baseline emissions in the same row, like of course it's going to be 0 because there was no difference of emissions.
Yeah.
So I just want to know like how to go about that, because with my project in specific, I was told that like I should just like guess like how much went to recycling and compost, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, great question. And yet it'll go into negative mostly because they're calculations, right? So this number here is really looking at this number, the baseline minus the program. So if you don't have a baseline, it sounds like the way that it put in, you kind of just put in the numbers on this side. Yeah, these numbers will all be negative because of course, if this number is 0, you're minusing it by this number, it'll end up being a negative number. For a cleanup, my suggestion, I think, would be, and of course, it's a good thing that you brought up to Rita, that I'll say to the rest of the group as well, that sometimes when you're doing a project, especially like this, there is going to be a little bit of guesswork. And things aren't always going to be 100% what we kind of want them to turn out or be. For example, if we're looking at these are all sort of estimates as well. And there is sort of different factors to consider. That's something that when you're talking about the discussion of your project, you could just mention as well. If like these are all estimates, like things could be a little bit more accurate. We try to get as accurate as possible, but there is a little bit of we're trying to be, maybe we might be a little conservative, we might be a little bit over, but we try to get as accurate as possible. So yeah, so for a cleanup, what's really kind of going on, I guess, in a cleanup is what the items that you're collecting. I think you can safely assume that if they're on the ground, if you're collecting them from, let's say, a park or something, that's where you do your cleanup, that they would have gone to the landfill. So I think the numbers that you're collecting that you might put into program, I would put into baseline. And then by doing the cleanup, hopefully what it is that you've done, you might have split up those items. And again, if you didn't do this at the time, then maybe you can kind of estimate for yourself and just talk a little bit about it in your final report. So let's say I did a cleanup and I collected 12 plastic water bottles, a trampoline, couple of wrappers, and maybe a pop can. So that weight of those items would have been what would have gone to the landfill. Well, I collected those items. Instead of going to the landfill, those plastic bottles went to the recycling. And then you can kind of split those things up, and that's what I would probably put in the program admissions. So the mass here, what would have gone to the landfill, and then the mass of what you've actually done. It's a little bit tricky because it doesn't fit exactly into what we're trying to measure here, but that would be my suggestion for something like that, because the intention of a cleanup is that all the stuff that you would have picked up, you're assuming it would have gone to the landfill if you hadn't had the opportunity to split up the waste in a way that was responsible, making sure that things went to where they were actually supposed to go, they were sorted correctly. So I think that's kind of the assumption you're making here. I'd put it in, I would get your number, and then I would talk a little bit about what it is you actually did in your discussion. And again, some of these projects too, you might have to project to. So like sometimes it can be difficult, and this was something that happened last year as well. You might not, either if your project's ongoing, for example, you might not have your final impact number. You could also think forward and project a number that you expected to get if you had time to finish your project, or if you got to the level you wanted. So yeah, so Rita, for you, I would put the weight of all the items you collected as your baseline. And then if you did measure individual items and where they went, then I would put those numbers here. If you didn't, maybe if you had an image or a picture of the stuff you collected, if you think back, if you had like a notebook, you wrote them what they are, just kind of estimate these numbers here. Maybe you can find similar items, weigh them, and see if you can put them in. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely helped, but like wouldn't it still kind of be the same type of like it would just come out to zero, would it not? Um because for the baseline, were you saying that it would just be in like everything just went to landfill, but then rather I would just specify in the program emissions, like what went to what?
Yeah. So it's basically you're making an assumption with there that that the things you collected would have gone to the landfill. So you can see here that this is what I did here. So let's say I was collecting waste like in a clothing drive or a cleanup, and I collected all my items, and all of my items were 150 grams or something like that. And then because I did the cleanup, so this is what it would have been. So if I collect all those items, I assume you make the assumption that if you weren't there to clean it up, if you weren't there to collect those clothing, if you weren't there to collect those pop cans, then those things just would have gone to the landfill. So you're kind of assuming that people aren't going to recycle those items. So that means what you can do by your actions was all this 150 that would have gone to a landfill, maybe 150 of it went to the recycling instead. Now, in the calculation here, it is assuming that, so I think, yeah, like recycling, there is a little bit of a it does emit some GHG, but for the purpose of the project, we're just assuming that if it didn't go to the landfill, it has a 0 impact. So you'll see here that the number kind of is a null number. But you can see that because of the way the calculation is set up, you still get an impact number. So you still get something here because it's calculated in within the days and the actual weight of the items here. So you can see that even though that you didn't put anything in these numbers across, like you didn't have to put anything here, that you'll still end up with an impact number because it takes into account all the different cells. I hope that answers your question. But again, if maybe 150 of it didn't go to the recycling, maybe only 50 went to recycling, and 100 had to go to landfill because it was plastic and it was mixed plastic, it couldn't go. So then you'll see that the actual, this is carbon equivalent, this GCO2 EQ. That's what it is here. It's a unit of greenhouse gases. I didn't say it out very well, but that's what it is. It's carbon equivalents. You'll see that there's about 90 here, and because it takes into account all the items here. But really sort of is focusing in on the stuff that went to landfill, because that is really where those greenhouse gases are really emitted when it's in that anaerobic environment. It's not sorted correctly. So you'll see I still get, when it's in like that, you'll still get sort of a negative number. It might not be exactly true, but just put whatever it is in here because this is pretty accurate here. Again, it kind of depends because, well, you diverted 50, you still had 100 grams up here. So you're not reducing as much as you think, but it is accurate to what you're actually doing. So you just kind of put those numbers in and just pull whatever is here. Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, it depends on how you did your project. You might end up with negative numbers, but my suggestion would be to maybe make an assumption that things didn't go to landfill, but if things did go to landfill in your project, then you might end up with slightly different numbers. But if you're doing a cleanup, then your intention is for things not to go here, or for things to go, the least amount of things to go into the landfill as possible. So yeah, just be true to what you did, talk about what happened in your discussion, and then just take that number and pop it in as it is, even if it looks a little funny. If you're using the sheet here, these numbers, we set them up specifically to calculate the things that we want to measure. You can see when I make it big, you can see all those little mini calculations. Those things are taking into account some of those things that you're talking about. So even if you don't have a number here, it still measures and pulls. I feel like I'm losing you, I might be losing myself, but generally, I'll say it here for you, Rita. For cleanup, what you're trying to do is try and take whatever's to the landfill, you're trying to make sure that it goes to the recycling or to the compost instead. Put the numbers in as you are. If you get negative numbers, that's totally okay. If anybody else, if you're getting negative numbers, that's fine. Just put them in as they're true to your project and talk about what happened. That makes sense?
Hopefully. Yes. It does. Like, the only thing is, like, because, like, you would be picking up things that were in the landfill before, but now it's kind of like they're going in different sections by guessing. So then that's how it's kind of calculated, like the impact.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you got it. Yeah,
okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. And it is, like, if you're having, yeah, do send me any other questions if you have them. And there are, like, you're making some assumptions. That's why it's not, like, 100% accurate, but it's pretty close to accurate. And it's pretty close to what you did. Like, you did make an impact. You did do something. And you'll see that there. Cool. It is 6 o'clock, so if you do have some questions that you want to hang around and ask, I can stick around for a little bit longer. But if you do have to leave, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to thank you for joining me for this webinar as well. You'll see the webinar recording up on FeedLoop after, probably tomorrow morning. And if you do have any other questions, of course, email me your questions. Email me your calculation forms if you want me to take a look at it, just to make sure that you're filling out these numbers here, that none of these calculation things, these Excel calculations have gone wonky for you. I'll make sure to double check that if you feel like your numbers are getting, or maybe you're not sure if you're getting the right numbers, then do reach out to me. If you're not using the calculation form and you just want me to check your calculations, maybe just to make sure you're on the right track, do feel free to send those to me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. The final report link is in the chat. I'll email it to you. I'm going to try to send you more daily emails as we move towards our final report, just to make sure you guys get things in. You know that I'm here for you. So if you do have anything you do want to meet over Zoom, you do want to chat or just kind of check in, do feel free to do that. So again, if you'd like to stay on, just ask a couple questions. I'll stay on for probably another 15 minutes or so, but you're happy to leave if you have somewhere else to be instead. Cool. Awesome. We'll just get right into it, I suppose.
I saw a question about how to calculate like a diesel powered car.
Yeah, great question. You'll see that we put in a light duty diesel car and a heavy duty diesel car vehicle here. So this is where you'd want to look. Most vehicles are going to fall into one of these categories. Just emission factor is one of those things that's going to be is a coefficient, it's a constant, so it's not going to switch around depending on the brand of car. You just look at what type of fuel is inside it. So you just put, if this is you, and you can probably Google or find out that information online if you're wondering, or just shoot me a quick email and I can help you out too if you're not sure if you're this one or this one. But you can see that heavy duty diesel is probably like a big truck or something like that, something that's more off-road. So you can just pull that number directly across, just put it in here, whatever is true to you. And it'll be the same number here as over here, although this number, if you're not driving, which is the intention of a project that usually does transportation, you're going to try to not drive, it won't really matter what you put over here. It's more for the baseline rather than for the program. But you'll see that stuff here for you in the calculation sheet. If you don't have a calculation sheet and you're doing your own calculations, then these numbers are in the toolkit. So you'll find them in the toolkit underneath Mike and Denise's how to track, measure, record. All of the tables that are sort of in the side here are also there. So you can see them there too. Hopefully you're still around and you can see that question being answered. If not, it's going to be on the recording. So you'll see that there.
There was also a question if someone has already submitted their Google form, if they'll receive any kind of confirmation email.
Ooh, good question. I think it is set up that you might get a confirmation right after you finish submitting. I get notified when a submission comes in and I can see if you've submitted. Good question. I'll probably just to follow up and let me, in my daily email that I'll send tomorrow, I'll just kind of answer that question, make sure it's set up so you know that it went through. But yeah, so far I've gotten about 14 submissions. I think just projects that finished early, which is amazing. If you're still working on your project or your form, do not feel stressed. You have until Sunday midnight to get your project in. So yeah, so I'll follow up with that question to make sure you guys can see that your forms went in. I can see that they've gone in, and I think that's what counts the most. I'll let you know that I've received your final submission.
There's also some questions about what the minimum amount of time is to record the data, if it's possible to be too short, and if 4 weeks of data is enough time.
Yeah, that's a good question. We are not being very specific about the amount of time that you do your project. There is a lot of different factors this year than there was in previous years. The shorter time frame, the back and forth with some of the regulations, things were more open, you were in school, and then you're out of school, just the busyness generally of your schedules. So if you were only able to do your project for 1 week and you measured your baseline for 1 day and you did your program, so your GHG reduction for 5 days, then that is an acceptable project. If you were able to start early, right at the time that we set out the project, you did your baseline for 2 weeks, you did your project for 2 weeks, or you did your baseline for 1 week, your project for 3 weeks, all of those situations and all of those measurements are all acceptable for the final project. Yeah, we're not going to be nitpicky about how long you did it. The important thing is the process, that you've done the process, that you tried it out, that you did something, and that you're able to talk a little bit about what you learned. That's our most important takeaway from the project for you. And yeah, we'd love to give you those 20 hours. So do get your final forms submitted.
And I think we also just wanted to clarify if the wrap-up event is mandatory for receiving your volunteer hours.
Great question. It's not mandatory to receive your volunteer hours, but only submitting your project is mandatory. So do submit by the 25th midnight, and afterwards that week, I'll be processing and making sure that you get your community involvement hours. The wrap-up event is just a chance for us to come together for those projects that are being all projects are being judged. So I'll let you know if what kind of the outcomes of that is, but yeah, there's just an opportunity for us to recognize the project, recognize ourselves, pat ourselves on the back for the great work we did, and just celebrate together. So that's the intention. It's not mandatory, but I strongly encourage you to attend if you'd like, and invite you all personally to be there if you want to get involved. More details coming.
Also, is this spreadsheet available in the toolkit or is it somewhere else?
Great question. This spreadsheet is available through the toolkit, but I've also directly emailed it. It's just a little bit simpler because, like I said, I sent it out as an attachment rather than a Google Sheet, because with Google Sheet I thought it would get a little bit tricky sharing it out to the 150 or so students that are doing projects. So yeah, if you don't have this sheet and you want to try to find access to it, just email me and I'll just send it back to you as blank form. This is the form I've been sort of working out. So I'll just delete all the numbers. I've got a version of it that I can just send to you and you can just use it. Yeah. So if you don't have this sheet, email me. It's katrine@haltonenvironment.ca, which I will share. I'll throw up so you can screenshot and see in my presentation. Yeah, so you can see that's there. So you can message me, send me a quick email, just even if it's just, I need a calculation sheet. And that's it. I'll send it back to you. You don't have to worry about what is in the email. I'm on my email all week this week. I'm really here for you. Again, I'm available if you want to meet up for a quick Zoom meeting like this, one-on-one, where you can talk through some stuff, or if you just want to bounce some ideas off of me in terms of your calculation of the final report, then do feel free to do so.
Also, it looks like Jaslyn has her hand up, so if you want to go ahead, feel free.
Okay, so for the wrap event, you mentioned that if we're interested, we should email you about like possibly presenting a PowerPoint kind of thing. What kind of information about a project? Would it just be like a quick rundown of like why we chose it and like I guess the results of our project?
Yeah, great question. For the wrap event, in terms of the presentations, I haven't fully firmed up sort of what I might ask you to present. Hence why, if you might have reached out to me, I did get some emails about asking a little bit about the presentation side. I might have said, or I'm saying now too, then not to worry about it a little bit till after, because I'm still working at those things too. But yes, the gist of the presentation on the wrap-up event is to talk through some of the stuff that you would have said in your report. Maybe why you picked your topic, what happened, the results, and the outcomes. And it could be done in a video form if you'd like, just to film yourself. It's going to be on it will be a virtual sort of event as well, so it can be done however you'd like. If you want to do a PowerPoint presentation, that works for you, or maybe it's just a poster that you kind of show up on a share screen and you speak to. So yeah, the format of it is very open, and more details I'm going to put together what specifically I'd like to kind of for you to touch upon in that, so that you really know what it is to put in later. But just to get a gist, just a little teaser, those are the types of things that you might see in your presentation. And I think, yeah, you mentioned it too, so you kind of were on the same page there, I think.
Okay, thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for asking the question.
Okay, the only remaining question I see, unless I've missed something, is they're just a bit confused on how to calculate everything. Is there any specific thing you need help calculating? You can just put it in the chat if you'd like. Okay, she says she thinks she's okay.
Okay, cool. And I'll say too, like if you're doing a project and because there are some like mix of topics where you're really looking into like, transportation, like an appliance, as well as food and or waste, then that's the nice thing about the sheet is you can put in your information for all of those things. It'll pull everything and you'll find your final number here. If you're doing it yourself and you're handy with Excel, so you use something you know, or you just like writing those calculations yourself, then again, to get this number, you just add up that final impact number, which is baseline minus program. So that's your final impact. But yeah, if you're just doing one, then you'll just need that one number. If you're doing a bunch of different things, this will just be the sum. So you just add all those numbers together, and that'll be your final carbon equivalent GHG reduction number that we see in the final report. Amazing.
Also, when can they expect to receive the volunteer hours and what format would it be in?
Yeah, good question. I am going to be checking in with Suzanne and the HDSB about that specifically. For my intention, from the conversations I've had, it'll be I think it's a little bit more internal, so you won't have to formally request a letter from us and we get that to you. We sort of cut out the middleman there. But I will confirm with them, make sure I have the correct information, and let you know as soon as I know it in an email form about how you'll be receiving those hours. It'll be probably next week, probably early next week. You might start trickling in or finding that information out or even receiving your hours. So once we know that you've submitted the final report, because that is a requirement to receive the 20 community involvement hours, is to submit your final report again on April 25th by midnight. So yeah, so just get that report in and everything else will trickle in right after.
Okay, and then another question we have is, if they did their program for 3 times their baseline, should the baseline be multiplied by 3 to calculate the savings?
That's a good question. I might have to see your calculation form and see if I can get it, because I'm not sure in terms of multiply by 3 your baseline, what your intentions are, what you're actually sort of measuring. I might just have to review that one. So send me an email tonight if you remember, and then I can follow up with you. Ideally, my initial thing is that you won't have to multiply it, because your baseline is just measuring about how long you did it. It's sort of more, the more important thing is how many days did you do that baseline, and then your program emission is again focused on, it's sort of 2 independent calculations. There is crossover, but there's sort of 2 separate sort of factors that you're measuring. But yeah, email me your question and then I'll probably get back to you, because I have to think about this one. Maybe reach out to Mike and Denise. They might have a better, more concrete answer to help you finish that out as well. Hope that helps. I mean, it doesn't really help, but do email me and I'll get back to you, because I think that'll be more helpful. On that note, I'm going to close off our webinar. Thank you again for sticking around, asking your other questions. If you think about some other questions, and do feel free to email me. I'll be sending out more information all this week. I'll be sending out the final report link to you, so that way it's very easy for you to find it. Again, I mentioned I'm making that frequently asked questions, something similar to this presentation. So that way it's very easy for you to know what exactly you put into the form. I want to make everything as simple as possible so you guys can all get your 20 hours and you can get your forms in. Amazing. Thank you all for being here, and good night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.